all for good yardage. I think we're back to him again. Ball is on the ground. The ball.
Offense number 71. 10-yard penalty. 15-second down.
So Trent Williams steps away from the heat. Heaves it. And it's knocked away at the last moment. It's Purdy launching it downfield. Third down as he fires downfield. And that was it. What's some odds on that? Ball swooped up and he touched it. It's a fumble. For catch is Purdy. Fakes. It goes long to the end zone. Oh, Samuel had a step. Catches his booty. Extra point. Oh, my goodness. No. Play of the game. A third and long 4. And they blitzed. And they forced the incompletion to him. Chiefs in on Purdy so fast he had to just unload it. So the drive stalls.
The stars for the San Francisco 49ers did not show up in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. I believe there's 2 plays that truly cost the 49ers the Super Bowl. I want to talk about those 2 plays, specifically the ones that I'm mentioning, as well as some drama has already kicked off with star wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk. And then, of course, other narrative that's going around the media that just needs to be addressed. It's driving me absolutely nuts because it has been loud. So we'll get into all that and more. Let's get into it, y'all. Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Ryan Tigey back in action. Had to jump on another gut-wrenching loss for the San Francisco 49ers to lose the Super Bowl. In my opinion, it was clear as day the 49ers were the better team. But ultimately, in the end, they didn't pull it off, and the Kansas City Chiefs got crowned Super Bowl champs once again. So why am I saying the stars didn't show up on offense? Well, there's a couple things that I noticed, and I'm sure anybody watching the game, the 200 million people that ended up watching the Super Bowl noticed it as well. Number one, injuries. Debo went out for a little bit due to a hamstring injury. He came back. Kittle went out for a little bit, which was very costly of Kittle having to go out due to injuries. But then yet, of course, he came back. So injuries was an issue on that side of the ball, let alone Feliciano went out and never returned, which was a massive loss. And that's one of the plays that I'm specifically going to mention about why the game was lost, was because John Feliciano wasn't in there. And then, of course, you can't go without saying Christian McCaffrey's fumble, the first possession of the game. That was a massive fumble, killed all momentum. Obviously, our defense allowed the Chiefs to get no points off that fumble, but nonetheless was definitely a drive-killing fumble when the 49ers were moving the ball down the field. And then, of course, Trent Williams, 2 crucial penalties. I believe it was on that second drive, which was uncharacteristic. I get it. There's a lot of nerves going on. And what's interesting is that it seemed the nerves came from the players who hadn't been there before. 2 of our best players in Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams. Obviously not going to place a lot of blame on them because they still had a fairly good game. But nonetheless, those were crucial moments in the game where our offense didn't show up. And then, of course, Brandon Aiyuk, only 3 receptions. Kittle, 2 receptions for 4 yards. Because let me be clear, Brock Purdy was not the problem. Brock Purdy was actually a highlight within the offense that seemed at times overwhelmed. So that's just a way to summarize it. The first thing I want to touch on is Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk has wasted no time this offseason. He clearly isn't happy with the amount of targets he got. Now, I haven't gone back and watched the game because we already know what happened, and it's just heartbreaking to go back and watch the 49ers lose the Super Bowl game when they so desperately needed one and were so close to winning it. But Brandon Aiyuk has already come out. Everyone knows he just got done with his 4th year, and now he's going to be on his 5th year option. So one thing I want to state up front, Brandon Aiyuk, he's not a free agent. It's not like he can just go anywhere. If anything, the 49ers could tag him and force him to stay in San Francisco for another year if they're not able to come to a contract agreement, or if Brandon maybe doesn't want a contract extension with the 49ers. But he's already starting to send subliminal messages on his IG the other night. His quote was, "Don't forget what got you there." So that's a clear indication he's not happy. But where the real drama kicks off is Brandon Aiyuk's brother, who, according to everything I've seen, is his best friend. Brandon Aiyuk's brother initially posted on IG, why does an all-pro 1,300-yard receiver only have 3 catches in the Super Bowl? So that plays right off to what Brandon Aiyuk was saying with don't forget what got you there. Obviously, Brandon Aiyuk was huge throughout the year, our best receiver by far, and still finished in the top 10 in receiving yards with the lowest, like I think 36th in targets. So he had a phenomenal year, beat his prior year high in yards for the season. So with Brandon Aiyuk saying, don't forget what got you there, that's obviously implicating him. And then, of course, his brother posts something very similar saying, how does an all-pro 1,300-yard receiver only have 3 receptions in the Super Bowl? Well, again, I got to go back and look at it. But from what it seemed like to me, just watching the game live, is it didn't seem like our receivers were getting that open. I'll touch on the one where Brandon Aiyuk was super open at the end in overtime. But also, I think it's not taking into account the amount of fucking pressure Brock was dealing with. Chris Jones, in my opinion, should have been the Super Bowl MVP. That guy dominated the right side of our offensive line. Absolutely dominated. So one thing with his brother popping off with that Instagram is, well, I don't know. Have you looked at the offensive line play? Because they were getting roasted by Chris Jones throughout the entire game. Brock was under duress fairly quickly, and that has, I'm sure, a lot to do with it. But even when Brock had time or he was mobile and he moved outside, he was still holding on to the ball. And it's because the receivers weren't open. Again, don't know if that is specific to Brandon Aiyuk, but as we've seen Brock do all year, he gets the ball to his playmakers and has no issues, none of just chucking it up there for his receivers to go out and get it. So that was a little interesting that is clearly BA and now his brother's stance. But what's interesting is Brandon Aiyuk's brother said, following his initial Instagram post, he then said, this is the exact reason why we're leaving SF. Thank you for drafting my brother. We are forever grateful. And then at the very end, he said, BA to Vegas. Okay. Number one, are they using like the Deebo Samuel playbook? If you guys remember, Deebo obviously asked for a trade during his contract negotiation because the 49ers, they have a negotiating timeline that they use with all players, including Nick Bosa. So it doesn't matter how high of a level or how high of a priority you are. They have timelines for these things, and there should be a little bit more faith. Every player, especially the ones that they have drafted, they've taken care of. That's not even debatable. George Kittle, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel, the list can go on, but people that they draft specifically are always the guys that get taken care of. We've yet to see one not get taken care of. And then that brings me to my next thought is Brandon Aiyuk wouldn't let his brother just post that based on his own feeling. I mean, maybe he could, but if my brother did that without me knowing, and I was going into a massive contract negotiation with tens of millions of dollars that I'm going to be discussing with the 49ers, I would freak the fuck out on him on doing that, especially putting out another team that you want him to go to. It's fucking child's play. And again, maybe it's all part of their strategy of what they're going to do this offseason and just be ultra loud and difficult about it and subliminal. Again, similar to kind of what Deebo Samuel went through with his contract negotiation. But nonetheless, it's like, okay, I get it. Brandon Aiyuk, he should be getting more targets. That's not even a debate. But what are you supposed to do when your team has a stacked roster of skilled players all around you? I think Kyle did it perfectly this year in terms of distributing the ball. Brock distributed the ball perfectly as well himself, but maybe that's not good enough for BA. Maybe he wants to go and potentially be a 1A or a true one on another team. And he has that right to obviously feel that way. But you want to talk about, okay, his brother is saying BA to Vegas. Who the fuck is their quarterback? Who's their offensive coordinator? Like BA to Vegas. Why the fuck would you want to play for the Las Vegas Raiders, who have been a dumpster fire franchise? Oh, by the way, they have another new coach in Antonio Pierce, who is a defensive player, a defensive-minded head coach. And then they have Devontae Adams already over there. So if you go on a team with Devontae Adams, you definitely will be 1A. But again, who the fuck is going to be your quarterback? Doubtful Jimmy G is going to be there. His season was atrocious, and it was clearly a Mark Davis decision to not allow Jimmy G to go back in, because there was multiple times last season where Jimmy G was clearly a better option than the quarterback the Raiders were playing with, but for whatever reason, they kept him out. So Jimmy G is going to not be a Raider, which brings me back to the point. Who the fuck is going to be the quarterback? So anyway, it's already started. It's going to be a long off season, but the 49ers, it ain't even debatable. They need Brandon Aiyuk. He will be priority number one this offseason. And hopefully, as their track record has shown, they can make it work and all parties can be happy and BA can be a rich, rich man because he deserves it. He is fucking unbelievable. Another thing that is driving me nuts as I've been going around the internet streets is the people saying, fire Kyle Shanahan as head coach. That is the dumbest take and complete idiotic thing to say for a head coach that has completely turned around this franchise and gotten to now multiple Super Bowl appearances and 4 NFC championship games. The fact that people would want to move on from Kyle, I almost don't even believe it. I know a lot of people are talking about it, but I don't even believe that those people believe what they're saying. Who the fuck would do a better job than Kyle? Who? Literally, I would love to get some names about who would do a better job. That's an available coach that would do better than Kyle. Kyle is unbelievable at coaching. And this narrative that he can't close out the big games, that's also fucking stupid. In a lot of the narrative around firing coach, he's 0-3 in the Super Bowl. Okay, no, he's not. He is 0-2 in the Super Bowl. He was not the head coach in Atlanta when Atlanta lost the Super Bowl to the Patriots. He was the offensive coordinator. So I truly don't understand. It seems like clickbaity narrative about Kyle Shanahan being 0-3 in the Super Bowl. He's not. He's been there twice as a head coach. So you're telling me every other offense and defensive coordinator that's been a part of a team that's lost the Super Bowl, that should be held against them? No, that's fucking dumb. And a lot of the 0-3 postings I'm seeing are coming from national brands that we all know within the sports media. And again, it's something clickbaity. It makes it look more dramatic than what it is. So I just had to get that out there regarding Kyle. And thankfully, it sounds like Jed York from interviews prior to the Super Bowl, Jed York knows the coach he has, the team that they've built, and Kyle Shanahan can get the fucking job done. He's just, the ball hasn't fallen his way in the last 2 Super Bowls that they've appeared in. On to now the reasons the 49ers lost the Super Bowl. The 2 that stick out to me the most is the muffed punt. Special teams in the 3rd quarter, the Niners were up 10-6. They were up by 4 points. And it wasn't Ray McLeod's fault entirely. The main person that was responsible for the muffed punt was Luter. That was the person whose leg the ball hit off of, and that was a mistake on his part. Obviously, you would say Ray should be able to yell as loud as humanly possible, get out of the way when he knows the ball is going to drop to the ground. Again, it's the Super Bowl. There's a shit ton of noise, so that might not have been possible. But he got blocked into the ball hitting his foot. The part where I do place a little blame on Ray, I understand he was trying to make a play to scoop the ball up and run. But from the time I was coached in football as a youngster, it has been taught, pounded into your head in every level of football, you jump on the ball, which he definitely should have done because then the Chiefs wouldn't have been able to recover that reception. Ray's hands touched the ball, but he was trying to make a play, scoop it up, which I get, but it backfired. So he is partially to blame for that muffed punt because that was a massive point in the game. There was like 3 minutes left in the 3rd quarter. Niners up by 4 points, 10-6. And then what did the Chiefs do when they get that ball? 1 play, touchdown. The defense just held them to a stop, got the ball back for their offense. It's a lot to ask for them to immediately come back on the field. And there was clearly a lot of confusion going on in the secondary. And it was an easy touchdown, too easy of a touchdown, which shifted the momentum and got the Chiefs officially the lead. And then the second reason the 49ers lost the Super Bowl was getting 0 points off both turnovers. Jair Brown's interception netted 0 points. Pacheco's fumble, which was massive because they were driving. Patrick Mahomes just hit that bomb, like 50-yard pass or whatever it was, and they were immediately in the red zone. The very next play, Pacheco, Deommodore Lenoir caused that fumble, and we were able to recover. A massive play. But then again, the 49ers got 0 points from it. So they didn't take advantage of their opportunities, and that falls on the offense. Not to say that Spags and that Kansas City defense, and by the way, those corners were all over our receivers, deserve some credit for that, but that falls on Kyle and the offense for not getting any points on both those turnovers. So those were the 2 main reasons, in my opinion, that the 49ers lost. If I had to choose a third, because there was quite a few to choose from, it would definitely be the last offensive play for the 49ers in overtime. There is a lot of people blaming Colton McKivitz for letting Chris Jones go literally unblocked to put immediate pressure and get in Brock's face for him to have to throw the ball way too prematurely because we had two guys open. Brandon Aiyuk was wide open in the middle of the end zone. And then Juwan Jennings, who was MVP, in my opinion, of that game for the 49ers, he would have easily scored. But it was because Chris Jones went unblocked. So that is on the offensive line, but it wasn't on Colton McKivitz. It was on Spencer Burford. Thankfully, Spencer Burford has come out and taken responsibility because he saw Colton McKivitz just getting berated on the internet. But what happened, Spag sent a blitz. They were sliding right. Kittle was in tight, and Kittle ran a delayed route. And all Kittle's goal was chip the defensive end and push him out wide, which he accomplished. And then Colton McKivitz slid right to help with that protection. It was Spencer Burford who slid left to help the center when Chris Jones and a free rusher came right through his gap and forced pressure on Purdy early. And it caused us to have 3 points versus having a wide open touchdown. So it is what it is. Those were definitely the top 3 reasons that the 49ers lost the game. In my opinion, as a fan, this Super Bowl loss hurt more than any other, at least in my lifetime for sure. More than prior Super Bowl losses, whether you go back to the Harbaugh area or if you go into 2019, this one hurts the most. And it's because this was the most winnable game. This was the worst Chief offense by far in this Patrick Mahomes era. A bunch of literal no-name players, but yet the 49ers still lost. And the 49ers defense, they showed up. How many more stops did the 49ers need to get in order to win this game? Especially with the 49ers loaded roster. I mean, perfect situation. You got a quarterback who's been unbelievable, who's getting paid next to nothing. So then you build a stacked team around it. We have the best left tackle. We have the best running back. We have the best tight end. We have the best linebacker duo. We have the best fullback. We have the best defensive end. I mean, literally top players in their position, of all pros and pro bowlers everywhere. And they just couldn't pull it off. And it is so frustrating. And I feel bad for all of the players, all the coaches. This was the year. They fucking know it. And that makes it hurt a little bit more. And of course, also on the internet, what I'm seeing a lot of videos showing no holding calls. There was definitely some atrocious no holding calls, but at the same time, you can't blame it on the refs not throwing the flag. I mean, if you think about it, in overtime, the very first possession that we had in overtime, Brock Purdy threw the ball into the ground on 3rd down. We were going to have to punt, but we got a holding call, and it was a holding call against Juwan Jennings, which allowed us to keep the drive alive and then ultimately go down and score 3 points. But in my opinion, there was definitely some atrocious Nick Bosa one. I know that Fred Warner one of him getting tackled essentially, but I think it was primarily Bosa ones that were pretty egregious. But at the same time, I would still prefer the refs not to throw flags than to be flag happy, because there was a minute there they got flag happy, and that shit just gets annoying. Just let the boys play, which they did. But I don't think that's a real reason that we can say that the 49ers lost because of missed calls. Something I will be looking for this offseason, I will be curious to see what happens to Steve Wilks, defensive coordinator. It was pretty obvious that Kyle was out of his mind upset when Steve Wilks in overtime was calling a 0 blitz. I can't remember the last time Kyle has called the timeout in any game to switch up a call that the defensive coordinator is making. So all in all, I'll be curious to see what happens with Steve Wilks. I think there was a lot of disconnect throughout the year of not being on the same page. Obviously, Kyle made him come down from the booth, but all in all, it didn't seem like it clicked that well. Obviously, the defense played good enough on the Super Bowl night without question. They were unbelievable for the most part, but Kyle calling a timeout to switch up the call, and even Tony Romo was talking about it on the broadcast, saying, I don't like this play call, Jim. I'll be surprised if Steve Wilks comes back as defensive coordinator and Kyle doesn't bring in somebody else or promote somebody else internally.
On Steve Wilks, have you guys spoken? Will at his stage and the stage in his career and where you want the team to go, is there any reason to think he won't be back next season?
No, that's stuff that, we'll talk about a ton as this week goes. We'll talk about a ton in the offseason. Where we want our team to be, our defense, our offense, special teams, and that's a lot of conversations, a lot of film, a lot of personnel or salary cap things we got to discuss, drafts. So, no, we're just haven't even watched the game yet, to tell you the truth.
Is Steve Wilks coming back next year?
I haven't talked to anybody yet, so yeah, I expect all our coaches to be back.
So the bottom line of this is, in overtime, the 49ers scored 3 points, which was a disaster. They should have put on 7, and the defense had opportunities to stop Kansas City on that last drive. Had they done that, the 49ers would have won the game, but it didn't happen. And it didn't happen in partly because of both offense, defense, special teams, coaching. So with that being said, I'll wrap it up there. It will be a long offseason. It's already getting loud, already some drama going on. I'll make sure everyone stays locked in, knows what the updates are. They'll get through this. They'll make another run. We got another year with all the same players. All of our core players will be there. There's definitely some things that the Niners need to address, most notably their offensive line and locking in some receivers, a.k.a. Juwan Jennings, Brandon Aiyuk. We'll see how they can do their cap gymnastics with Prague Marate. But nonetheless, it hurts. They will be back. I have all the faith. All right, y'all. Until then, like, comment, subscribe. Hit me up. Peace.
Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up. Secure the bag, yeah, I get the bus. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up. Secure the bag, yeah, I get the bus. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. I've been on the flex since flex zone.